recess, but calling the meeting back to order. I was able to get a hold of the town administrator, who gave me the cell phone for town council. I was able to connect with her voicemail a couple times, and I sent her a couple text messages, but I was not able to get a hold of town council. I then waited several minutes to see if she was able to respond to the text messages. Being town council, there's a good chance she's currently sitting in a meeting in another town right now, because they work until like 10 o'clock at night. So it is difficult to get a hold of her. In that time waiting, I did briefly read the statute, and I did, well, wait for Mr. Parisi to come back. Okay. I did briefly read the statute, and I did read some brief Horn documents on the shot clock provision. I think ultimately, what I would suggest is, I'll ask the board if anybody wants to make that motion. There are some questions of fact and law related to whether or not the shot clock applies. If it did apply, it's a rebuttable presumption. We would have to present evidence that either our laws were overly complicated or there are administrative delays. I'll let town council speak to those. This is internet research from the Google. It's not full legal research. It's not the same thing. But I just say that to say that it's a rebuttable presumption. It's not an automatic injunction or anything like that. And I just say that for the board's benefit. That obviously, and like I said, I encourage the applicant to exercise any rights he feels that he's due, and threatening to do so, I'm not gonna hold against anybody threatening to exercise their rights, because frankly, constituents all the time threaten to do the same thing. And I'm not holding it against anybody, whether they're an applicant, a constituent, or whatever. It's the way our system works. We're all just doing our job and zealously representing the people we serve. I don't know if anybody on the planning board has an alternative strategy that they would like to present.
I haven't calculated this drop dead date. You say it's September 1st from what? Going back 150 days. What's the date you're starting with?
August 4th. I mean, April 4th, sorry.
April 4th.
Now, I think there's a question of law and fact on what constitutes the application, because there's a question of law and fact on what constitutes a complete application for the purpose of it. And we do have something specifically called a completeness review, so I'm sure we would sit here and we would talk about different ways we disagree on how each other interpret that. That's literally what we do. There is a question of law and fact on that.
Well, and his is dated, the date on that's under his signature is April 6th. But I don't think buying 2 more days gets us to the 3rd with Labor Day weekend and to try to meet again.
What does the time
let me ask a question.
I'd like to keep the discussion with just the board and the applicant for a moment.
What's gonna happen on September 7th?
Well, on September 7th, we would also have the benefit of counsel, because we've made reasonable efforts to try to get a hold of counsel to sort this out tonight. And although, like I mentioned, Alice and I are attorneys, I'm not a municipal law specialist. I know just enough to be dangerous. In this particular situation, you've threatened litigation. It's perfectly reasonable for me to say, okay, you're an attorney. I don't even know if you're licensed to practice in Massachusetts or if you're under a corporate exception. But either way, I have reason to believe that is credible. And for me to ask for counsel to represent me in an official capacity is perfectly reasonable, and I've never seen a court look at it any other way.
No, I agree with that. My concern is that, are you gonna be ready to make a decision on September 7th?
We are,
If you're not ready to make a decision now.
we're gonna be ready to make decisions, whether we're making a specific decision on the application, it's something that's possible. I can't sit here and say that that's definitely gonna be the case, because there's a lot of conversation we're talking about having. Now, I'm also gonna suggest that, we both don't have to sit on our hands until that time period. I am going to chase down counsel, and get a hold of her as soon as possible. And, I'm gonna talk to the other parties here. Maybe we have, because it's an administrative matter, there might be an opportunity to have the TA and council work on this issue ahead of time. And we get closer to having something ready to go, and my plan's not to sit on my hands until then, and I'm sure it's not your plan. If you decide for some reason that you want to go and ask for that injunction and we have to rebut the presumption, we'll let everybody do their job. I think that's more than fair. And I hate to use the cliche, but you do what you have to do, we do what we have to do. It's how the system works. I hope administratively we can come up with something through there, before then, where you can feel better about this and we can feel better about this. Under the law, we have to continue a public meeting to a time and date certain. Potentially, we could schedule a meeting as a placeholder before the shot clock period, if the board was inclined to do that. Well, the alleged shot clock period, to be clear, because there is a question of fact and law on when it runs, and whether or not the administrative delays that we've been talking about so extensively rise to the level that's talked about under the case law. Like I said, we're both gonna disagree on that. We don't need to go into that now.
What is going to help the board make a positive decision? That's what I'm seeking. I'm not seeking litigation. I apologize if I appeared to threaten that. I'm here to get a positive decision. So what's gonna help the board make a positive decision?
Ultimately, we make our decision on whether or not an application conforms to the bylaws and whether or not the site plan conforms, and we rely heavily on our expert, and that is why we've dug in hard on that trench, because we really do rely heavily on that. And you can watch some of the previous meetings we've had when we've gone through and we've debated special permits. There's usually been 6 or 7 pages of stuff, even in things that I look at and I'm like, yeah, this looks easy. It's all great. And then we all have that same experience. And then we go in and we go through the notes that our consultant applies, and I learn a ton of stuff every time. And like I said, we're all learning every time. I'm not an expert in this. I'm choosing my words carefully here because obviously they're of significance. Well, I will pause for a moment on that and see if there's any.
So what he's specifically asking for, and I have to go back and look at what Bill's quote was, but he's saying, can you grant a special permit subject to a satisfactory site plan review, subject to a decommissioning plan, subject to whatever, so he doesn't have to spend $11,000 before he knows which way the wind is blowing. That's what he's asking, okay? I don't know whether we can do that.
I don't know
But
the
I think we
answer.
can find out if we can do that
That would be
by the
one of
7th.
That's one of the things we need to talk
And then it would be
council about.
negotiating with you. What are you willing to do after, I mean, assuming we could do that, what is gonna be, do you wanna reduce it further, the bill further? What's on his list that you could maybe do that would save him some time?
And I'm even hearing from you that you're willing to consider that amount, assuming again that you're looking at this here from the perspective that there's finality to this here, from an outcome that provides you with what you're looking for.
In a timely fashion. That's correct.
Absolutely, I mean, timely fashion is very important, but again, I think the timeliness needs to be accounted for from our perspective in terms of being, in us being able to evaluate what we have received, and also make sure that, you know, we have the time to review it on our end.
So, what concerns me about what you're proposing, and I do see your hand up, but I'm gonna continue this deliberation as it is for probably the foreseeable future, just to be upfront about that. What my concern is essentially you're asking us to issue a special permit subject to a whole bunch of conditions that are really frankly material. We need to answer the question about whether or not we even have the authority to do that, which I don't know if we do. And then there's ultimately the question of where, if we did do that, I would certainly want to hear from council about what the actual outcome of failure to meet those conditions are. Because setting up a special permit and having it be subject to fairly material conditions like that, it almost seems like it's also inviting litigation, and not like the kind of procedural stuff we're jockeying the position on now, but like actual expensive for all of us litigation. And I don't like that aspect of it. So I would want to ask council about, well, what would those material elements mean, or those material conditions? And what, as a practical matter, would be the enforcement? I've never even seen a model of how that would work. I don't know if we can do it. I could not commit to doing that tonight. And
Usually
it sounds
we-
like the rest of the board feels similar, that they couldn't commit to that tonight, because
It puts us in an untenable situation, I hope you understand that.
I understand that, but could we get there on September 7th? Because what's gonna happen on September 7th is you're gonna have Mr. Place say, the bill is reasonable.
No, I don't think it is from that
And then
perspective.
I'm forced, so all we're doing is postponing the decision 2 weeks.
I don't
so
think that's. Go
to
ahead.
interject on this, because I feel like we've talked
Yeah.
about this a lot. Yeah, he's already said that. And to the extent for the specific tasks that he has outlined, we can debate all night, but for the specific tasks he outlined, the hours that he puts out in the rate is reasonable. The part where we're disagreeing here is about whether or not the scope of review that we're asking him to do is appropriate for you to take on the risk for. That's all this is about. It's I don't think it's about really much else other than if there was a shot clock problem and then an injunction did go your way, this obviously streamlined everything for you. But I don't think that's the slam dunk you positioned. I could be wrong, I'm not an expert on that, but that's why I wanna talk to town council. So, yeah, it could what you're proposing happen on the 7th? Potentially. Can we commit to that now? I don't think that would be fair to anybody to say, oh yeah, that's definitely gonna happen, and then have the meeting come and have the conversation go a different way, and have everything go sideways. And I think, like I talked about earlier, I think we've proven we're fairly open-minded. We want to look at the law, we want to comply with the law, we're very deliberate about what we do. I do understand what you're saying, that you feel like it was unfair to find out about the phases of the fees during the process. But in the other side of that, the fact that was there as an option was available online, and you are an attorney. So, like it or not, you get held to a different level, so.
What was available online? Mr. Place's fee schedule, or Mr.
the-
Meyer's fee schedule?
I understand where you're going with that, but let's continue to move forward here. Perhaps I wasn't in the right place to start that conversation. I think we have a reasonable dialogue here. We just have this one giant issue, an elephant in the room. I think everything else is surmountable. We can't sit here right now and say we're definitely going to do that. I think we can fairly say we would consider it. I don't know if anybody on the board has a strong objection to not considering it after we spoke to council. Does anybody on the board have a strong objection to trying to sort something like that on the 7th and potentially voting on parts of it if it is appropriate after talking to council?
I would agree with you that that's the premise, but that I'm going based on, yes.
John?
Yes, I would have no issues as long as we speak with council and we can do that.
There you go, on the record. It's not a vote, but I think we all adequately expressed our opinion.
I'm gonna tell you what I'm going to do. I'm back in town on Tuesday for the zoning board, I believe, and probably before that. I'm going to get copies of previous special permit decisions from the planning board. I'm going to take copies of other special permit decisions done in similar applications that we've received. And I'm going to craft a special permit decision for the board to review. And I will try to look at your zoning bylaw very carefully and anticipate conditions that would be reasonable under your zoning bylaw. And I'll provide that to you as quickly as possible. If the board were inclined to vote on that at September 7th, then we could work out the site plan review fees. If the board's not inclined, then all you're doing is kicking the can down the road even further. And the last thing I'm gonna say is, and I'm sure your council will agree to this, the shot clock doesn't assume a positive decision. It assumes a negative decision, which allows me to file an appeal. That's the last thing I want to do. But the whole purpose of it is to encourage you to make a decision, one way or the other. If I had evidence that we were working towards a positive decision, I could be patient. If all we're doing is kicking the decision down the road, and I have no evidence that we're working to a positive decision, I might as well assume a negative decision. That's the whole point. So I will work with the board, draft a form of decision. If the board were inclined to look at it and vote, then I have no reason to appeal. And I can be patient with respect to Mr. Murray's review of the site plan and the drainage calculations and all the other things. I think that's reasonable.
I think all we can commit to without talking to council is, personally, I think that there is potential of that as a compromise. It's, well, that is a full statement on itself.
I appreciate it.
So.
I have a
the
couple
rest of the board-
questions. Can I just,
Absolutely.
I mean, there are other ways that maybe this can be done. I'm just talking
Go
out of the
ahead.
box. One
No,
of which
any
is,
crazy
you could
idea.
also ask town council, can you ever proceed where you make certain findings that are gonna be part of that special permit? You know, without granting the special permit, and those findings, you know, would satisfy him, all right? I'm not sure, but that may be a way you could proceed. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, I have noticed in reading some of these decisions online, that they include a decommissioning plan. Have you been asked to present that in other places?
Yeah, what we generally do is get a letter from an engineer that says this is the cost to remove it. And then we generally post a bond. Your bylaw requires cash surety, but to be honest, the cash surety that you have there is very much in line with the plans that we have submitted previously, so I can get you that.
I think it should be part of your submission on the
Right,
7th,
right.
because it'll become a big fight otherwise.
Right.
So those are my two comments.
And we would ask that you accept a bond rather than a cash surety, because this facility, it's different than the normal cash sureties that the planning board gets for like a subdivision road. This tower is gonna be there for 50 years.
Here's our problem with the bond, just let me
Oh, absolutely.
humor me for a minute, because I've been through this for 4 years. The problems with the bonds are that they expire in 5 years, and then the town has no personnel to do this, has to chase you down to remind you to have to renew it. Now, I am told by our town council, Carolyn Murray, Carolyn? Anyway, that there is a new statute which solves that in Massachusetts, where the bond lasts for 20 years or lasts for, so,
In our experience, it's a year and they're yearly renewable, and it's something that comes up all the time. And we post a bond for a year, and we're pretty good, we're more organized than the town of Hubbardston, I believe.
I'm sure you are.
However, if for some reason, a year and a half from now, someone says, oh, where's the bond, and we don't have it, you have zoning enforcement authority, because it's a condition of the zoning decision, the planning board decision.
if you're gonna
So-
ask for a bond instead of cash,
Oh,
you're gonna have to make it one of the terms of your condition.
and-
Bond
and-
is not renewed, permit is at risk, right?
Right, you're right, and but once it's a condition and we don't renew it, you know, for the life of the tower, we post a bond. So, and I don't think we can get I've never heard of a 20-year bond before.
The surety, you post the bond, but then it's the surety that backs the bond, right?
Yeah, well, the bond is issued by an insurance company.
Okay.
And so it's.
And that's for a year?
Yeah, generally you get it for a year, and then we renew it every year, and we provide it every year, and it's something that works in many other towns. And then there's always an inflation discussion and things like that. So after it's
Well,
gotta.
if you're gonna propose a special permit,
Yeah, I agree.
don't come in with a 5-line thing, come
Oh,
in
no,
with
it's
it,
gonna be-
and don't wait to present it at the meeting. Get it to him so we can all read it ahead of time.
I completely agree.
Other than that, I mean, otherwise, if we vote it down tonight, if we don't vote tonight, he's got a negative decision to work with, right?
Potentially,
Potentially,
the rebuttable presumption.
right. And if we do vote it down tonight, that kinda cuts him off for a long time, doesn't it?
Well, no, if we were to vote it down tonight, it would, potentially, it would open up the appeal and
Or open
litigation
up, he's
itself,
gotta,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I
One
said,
way he's
like I said,
appealing a denial, and the other
I'm
way
looking for a
he's-
positive decision. If we're working towards a positive decision, I can be patient. If we're, and whether you deny me tonight, or I assert on the shot clock, I'm in federal court anyways, and that's the
Okay.
last place I wanna be.
So,
Last place you wanna be too, but, it's just,
Yeah.
that's
yeah,
just.
but we're in court either way too.
To be clear, where,
Or we'd be patient enough to get a positive decision. So you gotta convince me that we're working towards a positive decision.
Well, those are two possibilities we can talk about, or ways around it. Or, I don't know, I mean,
One of the
Can-
things,
can
one of the
just-
things I would note, we filed 2 separate applications, special permit and site plan review, paid 2 different fees. So it's 2 separate applications, both in front of the planning board, both noticed, and my contention, and I encourage you to confirm with town council, you can approve one and not the other.
Okay.
And I think that's really what you need, Mr. Place for, is the drainage calcs and the driveway specs and the foundation and all those engineering things. The tower itself, you could approve this special permit. Is it in an appropriate zone? Is it meet all the requirements of the zoning bylaw? Yes, subject to receipt of site plan approval. And I think that's the reasonable compromise here, to
Okay.
afford the board more time and to give us the comfort to move forward.
I'm sure we're not the first people who have asked that question. We can get a pretty quick answer on that. You probably could have if you could reach her tonight.
yeah, but
Unlikely.
I made a
Unlikely.
diligent effort, and we can't sit here and wait till
No,
midnight.
I understand.
Trying to,
So I'll make a motion that we continue this public hearing until September 7th, 6:30. Are we ready for that?
Did you wanna consider a different date?
what would you suggest as a date?
I mean, the only other date that we have here would be the next Thursday, which would be, it would actually be September the 1st, right?
If that works for Alice and Erica,
And I understand,
If
I
that
mean,
works for
it's-
at least 4 of us.
I can do that, I can do
would
September
consider
first.
it.
There, you have my assurance, I'm not rushing into federal court on September second. So there's no need to differentiate between the first and the seventh. My concern is going past the seventh. If we have a discussion with the consultant and he reduces the scope $15 and I say no, then all we've done is kick it into October. So I don't think you need to schedule a special meeting. I'm not rushing into court.
September 7th being a Wednesday, right?
Yes, being a Wednesday.
Okay.
I would ask, like to ask the board a question. As far as working with town council and working with the TA, on these issues, do I need to get specific authorization from the board to do that? I guess not. That's just, okay.
I mean, you are representing the board in terms of getting, and it's really collecting information.
Okay,
It's not really collecting a decision, it's collecting information,
okay,
which you will then share.
yes. Fair enough. So if, I see you chomping at the bit, I really wanna move on past this
I just have one
and
quick
we're at a
question.
stable place, so.
Just have one quick question.
I'll hear it.
Because our zoning says that, part of a special permit process is a site plan review and acceptance. So can you actually vote on a special permit without having the site plan in place?
We're
If
gonna
you wanna
ask,
That's the
we're asking
question.
town council that
That's the
exact
question.
question.
Thank you.
I don't think all special permits require a site plan.
Yeah, there is a question of law there, and one more, last one, very brief.
This was a question I actually had before we ended up going on recess, because Mr. Parisi said that there was no environmental study needed. But in the requirements for wireless communications in the bylaws, the last requirements, section K, it's 18.5.2 requirements down to section K. A special permit as defined by zoning law 7.1 through 7.5 and environmental study impact study is required as part of the special permit process, and he said he can do one and that it wasn't required. I would like some clarification on that.
Okay, so that I believe we can answer from a procedural standpoint, because we did have a hearing to determine whether or not the application was complete, and we did have the benefit of our consultant for doing that. I don't know if anybody remembers the specifics of why we went that way on that.
I don't remember.
So,
I'm sorry, so
can I
that's
comment on
that-
that? I think I have a short answer.
Okay.
There's multiple forms of environmental assessments. We're used to dealing with a federal form that is never really applicable to us. It's a very involved process. If we were bulldozing through wetlands, there's an environmental assessment that's required. Your zoning bylaw has a relatively unique provision called an environmental impact analysis.
Yeah.
And it's got very specific criteria, and there was like 10 criteria times 5 ways you gotta look at it, and and that's the one thing that I didn't submit up front. We talked about it at one of the procedural meetings, and we've subsequently submitted that. So it's an environmental impact analysis under your own zoning bylaw, and it's in the application.
That was submitted in your revision? the
Exactly,
second
yes,
bo- okay.
yes.
Then it's posted, so
It's
you should be
posted?
able to
Yeah.
find it.
Because, okay.
Okay, we'll, reach out to the office, we'll try to help you
Okay.
find that and answer the question better. Where we spend a lot of time on it, so I would like to end the public comment portion. Because it does sound like we have a path here to figure things out. I think we've all said all the things we've said. I think we understand where we're at. We do believe that there's a pathway forward to the extent that we can say that.
And one last question, if the board has received any correspondence from butters, can I get copies of those? I would've thought they would've sent them to me, but,
So,
and there's,
yeah, I'll follow up on that. The challenge that we have is, and it was gonna be for later on in the agenda, but
file a public information,
Yeah, we'll absolutely give it to you, but just to say why there could potentially be a lag with that is, as you're aware, our full-time land use coordinator, got a new job. She's been consulting with us for a few hours a week to try to help out. She's been doing an amazing job, but she's only here 2 nights, and she serves 4 boards, something like that, so.
And she's finishing at the end of this month.
Yeah, and we had somebody who started on Monday and they got a new job offer Tuesday morning and they ended up not coming in.
I will tell you, this process would have been a lot smoother if Mallory had stayed.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely, neither here nor there, but yeah, it would have been, and it certainly would require me to lose, less days at work, and that makes me chippy. So, a motion,
I think that was presented by,
I made a motion to continue the public hearing, cause you have to be,
yes,
Yes.
time and
motion
date certain,
to, till 6:30 on September 7th.
and do we have a
I'm
second?
seconding that motion.
Any discussion on the motion?
No.
Ready to vote?
Alright, let's,
So, John?
let's have, a vote.
Who's
Steiger, aye.
Oh, sorry.
Look
Alice?
alike.
Amelia, aye.
Aye.
Monroe, aye.
So it's unanimous.
So the public, hearing portion of our meeting is continued, and
We are closing this,
The public
no,
hearing.
the public hearing.
it's continued, it's not closed.
Continued.
No, I'm sorry, not
Those are
closing it.
very
We're-
different
we're-
things.
we're-
Yeah.
It's done for tonight.
Yes, it is. To clarify to everyone in the gallery, that means the public hearing portion for this application is over.
Yes.
If there's other things you wanna stay and talk about, our meeting's not over. It's just the public hearing portion. But
public hearing, so no one will be able to speak to the issue further at the September.
we always let people speak for,
Not if you close the public hearing.
we did not close.
No, it was not
Continue.
closed. The public hearing is
Yeah.
still, is being continued. We are just going with new matters right now.
So let's just pause for a minute and let everyone know.
But, no, they continued the meeting till September 7th, but the public hearing is still open, so that you can still allow
you can-
input.
Oh, okay, so they're done with
Yeah,
this.
thank you, Rebecca.
They're not staying anymore today. Okay, that's what I was.
I don't think the bear's hanging around. I'm also putting my money on Loki.
We can hear you, John, you're not on mute.
There's a bear in our yard.
Whoops.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Here's honey. They love it.
So, moving down the agenda, we have,
For business.
we have new business. And, new business relates to this long-term project and issue exhibit, and, Mr. Stoll, I don't know if you'd like a copy of it to follow along, since
If
you
it's
have-
an extra copy?
Yes,
Absolutely.
since you have done us the honor of staying.
Hey, Christopher,
Yes.
A under new business is a zoning bylaw update. I would just like, right, under new business,
We are it's on this exhibit that we're about to talk about. We are absolutely about to talk about that.
oh, excellent.
Yes.
I just think it's gonna be done very quickly and it's so overdue.
No,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Kidding me, not only are we gonna talk about that, I'm gonna ask and see if you'll take, ownership of helping push that along.
Sure. Are you
Uh,
ready? Tell me.
Just about, let me get my papers organized here. So, there's this document, and I've sent it to the board. It was supposed to be attached to the original agenda that was sent out to the public. For some administrative reason or another, it wasn't. I believe it since has been, but it is available to anyone who would like to examine it. And what my intent with this is that I wanna keep a running list of what we have going on without pulling it into our actual agenda for a substantive discussion. So I wanna keep this as an exhibit where we keep these things on the list, a place where we can look at it, and have it available for procedural or administrative or scheduling discussion. so I circulated this list to the board ahead of time, and asked for some feedback. That feedback has been interpreted. So I think there's gonna be some stuff that ends up on this because there's a lot of years of memory going into this. So I would like to spend a little bit of time now just kind of looking at it and some of the things we have been looking at. So let's, I broke it up into two sections. There's tactical issues and there's strategic problems. So under short-term issues, we have the search for the new land use coordinator. We have documentation of the administrative processes, because I think we have a good opportunity here with somebody new coming in and another month oh, it's been a long night. Another month of being able to pick Mallory's brain on issues. So I think we need to consider what we can do to better document some of our procedures. I think we need to take a look at our minutes process, because we need to get caught up, and there are some that are missing. And these other ones are things that are issues in front of the board, but we're actually gonna have them on our next meeting's agenda. So how does that look to people so far? What are kind of the thoughts? Do we think this is a good summary of the short-term issues we currently have?
We have that one more, which is the Simpson Moosehorn response. You know, the guy who had the senior living complex that we were supposed to get back to?
So that is under unspecified date issues. So you believe that should be short-term?
I think that has to come up because we promised him an answer. I mean, it's only a procedural answer, right? But all he wants to know is, does he have to do a new special permit? Does he have, what's the process? I can try to help you out with that, actually, if you want.
But is that an answer that needs to be deliberated here, or is that an answer that the chair can provide directly?
I think the chair could provide it directly and just put it in the letters sent, right?
Okay.
Unless there's some ambiguity when you get to reading it, which I suspect there isn't.
Okay. So what do we need to ask town council that? We already have a list of stuff we need to ask. Or-
Well, we could probably just look it up.
Or, we're gonna, okay. So yeah, Alice, if you're willing to take that on,
Okay.
answering that question and just, let me know
I'll let
about
you
it
know,
and-
okay.
And
And
I'll sign the actual letter. So I guess if we're assigning people to take on stuff here, I think the only other thing that potentially needs something is,
what I'm thinking about on that is that it probably he has to build by such and such a date, or the special permit expires, right? And so it's,
yeah, I think it
think-
expired years ago.
I think,
Well,
I
project-
just need to look it up. I think it's a clear answer if you look it up.
Okay.
I will look it up for you.
That project has already been in place for almost a decade, if not more.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
But the question is, does he have to amend the special permit or does he have to file a new one? So it's just a direction, that's all he's asking.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, if we agree with the process on that, I think having Alice look into that, and then I'll sign the letter, and we'll move that along. Anything else that should be on those short-term issues that isn't under another?
Well, the only other one was the clay pit. I think we just.
yeah,
we
that's
sh- we should just make sure
been
we are-
elevated, right?
Yeah, that was under another one, but with
26 Gardner Road.
Mr.
No,
Pinto's
26
appearance, I think
Worcester
that
Road.
moves up. So,
Clay pit.
yeah, we talked about scheduling the tour.
Well, we did put that on our calendars,
Yeah.
right?
Well, she's gotta file something, right? So the only thing that's on it right now is just the site walk,
Correct.
right?
We said that this was going to take place on the
17th of September,
17th,
Yeah.
that's how I have it
but I won't be there, but that's all right.
26 Worcester Road, yep.
Okay, so I guess we also have a question on that, on whether or not what was submitted actually constitutes an application under the bylaw.
Well, there's an outstanding special permit,
Yeah,
and he wants to modify it to get out of a lot of stuff, which maybe is the right solution, but I'm just looking at procedural.
1 second.
well, that's why I'm asking. We obviously can't debate anything substantive on this,
Right.
but I believe we can talk about it administratively and procedurally.
I just wanted to understand, I do not recall that there was a special permit.
Well, maybe it's been before your time.
Well, the special permit was a long time ago, but there was a letter that was submitted with some printouts and pictures and such. That,
Only from an informational perspective.
okay. Well, that's what I'm asking. I think there's a question on whether or not that falls from informational perspective or whether or not that constitutes an actual formal request.
I think there's
That's
a
what I'm
very
asking
specific
procedurally.
formal request that has to be
Okay.
submitted, as did the Catalystos back in the day when they originally submitted their request. And there's a process that they need to follow. And that, in my opinion, that has not been done thus far.
I think he's right, and I think it's to amend the special permit or to
Okay.
void the special permit or whatever it is, something's gotta be done with what's there. What he's looking for is his $10,000 bond
Okay.
back,
Well, we'll.
so, and again, that's just procedural.
Yep. I will add that to the list.
But it's not just a matter of walking the field and
Yeah.
saying, oh yeah, we see what he wants to do, you know, there's gotta be follow-up on that.
I'll add that to the list with the comment that it probably needs a formal application. Anything else for short term? And we're on to unspecified date issues. And we have conduct assessment of possible impacts of northern tier rail expansion and MBTA zoning. That is potentially something that is huge. I brought it up with MRPC when I was talking to them, who is also planning on appearing at our meeting on the 7th. So,
Okay.
Not a good idea.
No, we cannot push MRPC. Their grant to do the master plan.
No, I understand,
It's
it's
already
just we
expired.
got a huge,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
it's a full plate.
well, we're gonna work out with council and see what
Gotta
we can
work
knock
something
out
out ahead of that,
Yep.
so it's not 2 hours.
Yeah. Either way, just
Hopefully.
administrative discussion there, nothing substantive. So yeah, that's potentially a huge thing. I don't think we need to look at it currently. We need to remember it. B, develop strategy for quantifying fiscal costs. What I mean by that is, I think we need to look at and quantify some of the realities that we have based upon how much of the town is owned by the state and how pilot funding works and how in the limited amount of land that we have left for development. I think we just need to do a more formal assessment of what's going on with that. That's what I have there as an unspecified date issue, just to explain it. Other unspecified date issues, although I guess it's not unspecified, is 3-year reviews for cannabis facilities. Moosehorn moved up. We need to keep looking for solar field reports and gravel pit restoration plans hang over our head like the sword of Damocles.
Yes, and with regards to solar field reports, I think we may have to look at the bylaw, potentially make some amendments to it.
We also need to look at, with respect to that, what the state's doing with the impact fees. Because if they're gonna eliminate all the impact fees, I think maybe the town's gonna wanna re-vote on whether they wanna do this, cause that's why it was sold to the town.
We're gonna, that comes up further down on the sheet.
Okay.
Yeah. So anything else on those unspecified date issues? So this next section is strategic product projects. They are things that have risen past the level of, we recognize this as something that we need to look at in the near future. There's something that we've looked at and said, this is something we need to take an action on. And the first one on that is publish bylaw updates not requiring a town meeting vote.
And I understand there's already been work done.
Yes.
So we actually have from Ryan a note, this is pretty recent,
Yeah.
that says he did you see, everybody got this, right?
And there's
That's
an attachment that
there
you
were
sent with the,
two attachments.
Yeah,
yes,
And the second attachment didn't include it did include, is really a new draft.
mm-hmm,
And it includes the accessory dwelling unit, the sign bylaw, the commercial marijuana minus the text the AG disapproved,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't include all these obsolete things, the rate of development that was disapproved and I don't know, the rest of it. So they've
Mhm.
cleaned it up and they've cleaned up the language that they considered clerical errors, cause I had a whole raft of them. And they've put it together and he's saying, can we put this out there and publish it? And I wanna take a vote tonight that we allow the second document to, I mean, you wouldn't say go to press, I don't know what the motion should be. Should the second document
So-
to replace,
the
to
current.
be our new standard?
so I think we should, I'm just looking at the agenda to make sure that we've made sufficient notice that we're gonna do that. I guess there's an argument that it comes in under 7 administrative matters.
Yes,
Yes,
Okay.
so we can do this here at that time? Were you asking it
take it out of
to-
order.
Take it
Well,
out of order?
we can take it out of order.
That's my point, so let's bring it back. There.
So I make a motion that we accept, the second document, attached to this August eighth, the memo, that is the redraft, is
I'd only like to, before you go ahead and say that, that document has strikeouts and has a bunch of other things. Are we talking about that particular document, or once we accept that all of those amendments are going to be, so we have a black and white copy,
the
not
clean version of the red
really
line.
clean, exactly, instead of the
Yes.
red line version,
That's a good point, we probably do want to accept the clean version of the red line.
okay?
yes, and you know what's missing here is the best bylaw.
No, it's here.
Is it? Oh, okay. And article, alright,
Yes.
they put it in the same bullet point,
Yes.
I almost had heart failure there, alright, yes,
So we're
amended,
okay,
accepting the red line changes, and the red lines are points of information.
Yeah,
right. So I'm just suggesting that
Okay.
you present this here as accepting the bylaw with all of the red lines actually implemented in such a way that we have a black and white version of this here.
So, yes, I accept that as a friendly amendment, is there a
Okay.
second?
Yes,
I get to call for that now, I know
Oh.
it's late. Do we have a second from Francois?
Yes,
Alright, hearing a first and second, do we have any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'm calling a vote.
Steiger, aye?
Livedall aye.
Amelia, aye.
Monroe, aye.
Okay, great.
It's a
The-
huge accomplishment.
The motion carries.
Yay,
God,
yay.
it's finally there.
So,
Yay.
so I guess also looking at this out of order, I believe there is some leftover for bylaw updates, potentially requiring a town meeting vote that they did not see as sufficient, so that is a project, and I think we need to figure out whether that's a short-term or long-term project. And also see if we have somebody who's particularly interested. I'm just trying to read Alice's face here.
Oh, you're talking about all the things they thought were
That they thought were
there
substantive.
were
and
more
not
than
just
clerical
scribbles.
errors.
Yeah.
Was-
Yeah, I'm willing to go through that and make a list of what they are,
Was that,
again.
and I
I'd
was
like
real
mine.
confused about this here, because we did receive 2 copies. Is
Mhm.
that the first copy?
Yeah.
Or, that's the first
I
copy?
think-
Yeah, cause what town council did is they went through and there were a whole bunch of changes that we through Alice had suggested. And they determined what rose to the level of a Scrivener's error and what went past that.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff that's past that is stuff that by saying it's not a Scrivener's error, we need to approve at a town meeting if we wanna change.
And potentially, do we have a fall town meeting again?
So, yes, the select board would like to schedule a town fall meeting. They actually reached out to me last night to ask ask what we would have on it, and I said, well, that's gonna entirely depend upon how this discussion goes.
Okay.
So I think at a minimum, there's that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see if I can get something together by September 7th. I don't have on the top of my head what they would reject, but I think some of them were pretty clear.
Yeah.
They were things like text that referred back to a previous map when there was a subsequent map, you
Yeah.
know, that sent me so if we can come up with those concrete
Yep.
list and it's not too big, I'll try to get to report by the 7th.
Even if it is big, it's worth doing.
Well,
I know it's a big ask from
you
you.
know, I don't know, I'm gonna read all the bylaws again, I'm gonna go from what I did before.
Yeah, I would go
Okay.
off of what specifically was
Okay.
called out, yeah. Yeah.
Although we could fix the monopole problem. Anyway, never mind.
Yeah, good grief. So I'm gonna move that up to short-term projects
Okay,
and put a Alice next to it. So yeah, I guess the next thing, medium-term projects, and this is where we have some questions to answer, from a scheduling, procedural standpoint, because select board does need to have another town meeting to approve some elements of the budget.
when do they want an answer by?
They're looking for an answer soonish, so I think what they ultimately wanna hear from us is when they think we could be prepared. They originally had suggested to me the end of November, the week before Thanksgiving. And I think if they were doing that, some of this stuff could conceivably be ready. Like
Pardon me.
the accessory farm use, that's been on hold because of all of the stuff I've been doing to try to balance
Yeah.
out what's been going on with this and what's been going on with,
I don't think you
with
could get that
administration.
ready.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of this is probably getting pushed to spring
Right,
because the cannabis bylaw, I was pretty close to having a draft of that done, but I think the world's changed since we did that.
also, there's a solar bylaw, we actually have a grant with MRPC to do.
It's there, that's what they're coming to talk to us on the 7th about.
Oh, I thought they were coming out with a master plan.
No. That solar bylaw update with MRPC kickoff on September 7th.
Freebie.
You need to write bigger.
No, it's right here.
Yeah, so they wanted to.
Oh, I printed it out small.
Yeah.
Okay.
They wanted to come on September 7th, and the EDC was gonna show up for that portion of the meeting, to talk about the solar bylaw, which is under a grant, and then the town center overlay, which is also under a grant, both of which we have interest in.
What about the master plan?
Well, that's also on the list, that's
Finish the master
C,
plan
but-
process, that's 3C.
Well, that's somebody different in MRPC. So I had reached out to Ryan about that, and Ryan had a call scheduled with them. I believe the call happened. I don't remember seeing an update on what it was, but I know there were things that Ryan needed to do with MRPC, or the acting town administrator now, Sandy, needed to do with MRPC for distributing the portions of the implementation chapter.
Okay. I see.
But I don't believe it is our table that is currently holding that up, although there's arguably an opportunity there. Now that we've actually moved to an interim, I'm gonna go back to having a regular meeting with the TA, and try to sort out some of the stuff with Sandy, once we've also done the pass through this list. Cause the other challenge has been is that all of this information hasn't existed in a single place, so trying to sit down and talk to other boards and committees about what we can do for each other has been challenging. So my hope is by condensing it all into this,
This
it
is
makes
great.
those meetings go a lot better. So yeah, master plan's definitely on there, and it's
Yeah, I
on
see
there
it.
as a short-term project.
Yep.
And I'll even put a note next to that, KM, follow up with Sandy.
Did you get him?
No, missed him.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think hard about the plan we have for the 7th, and push MRPC off, but the world changes sometimes.
You can't win these things, whatever you decide.
Yeah, there's no great outcome, we just gotta do what we have to. So under, medium-term, projects, some more administrative stuff, working with whoever the new land use coordinator is. Cannabis bylaw, we said on hold, accessory farm use bylaw. I'm gonna get that committee together again and try to get something to happen with that, with the stuff we've learned recently. There's just been a bandwidth problem, primarily with me. Anything else that should be in those medium-term projects?
Can't think of anything right now.
So, long-term projects, new housing production plan, cause aren't we due for that?
Big time.
So, the housing production plan we have, cause I went through this with Ryan, actually doesn't expire until like 2024, because it gets renewed for 5 years, but it gets renewed from the date they finally approved it. So, I can get you that date.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
We haven't met the target things we're gonna do by then, but we did put together a pretty good list of what we have done by then. And I think,
We're
I
gonna
mean-
talk about this quite a bit under the
Yes.
assigned planning board members to fill
yes,
out
I just wanted to let you know that it was
Yep.
not in imminent danger of the production plan itself of expiring.
Okay.
I think it's 2024,
Okay, so it stays on long-term.
long term.
Anything else on long-term, that is a specific projects?
I have one, rezoning the gravel pit area. The 200 acres on,
Yeah, I think that probably should make it on its own. Under long-term,
because
I
it is
think-
an opportunity to, you know, for both commercial uses and multifamily uses, and it really needs to be thought about. It's like the only one. It really ties into your section above, where it looks.
2A.
Where it's
Specifically
almost
MBTA
done.
zoning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, so it definitely goes on the list, it definitely connects to a lot of those things. I think to successfully move that forward with the town, I think we gotta knock off some of this other stuff first. Like, I think this
Sorry.
That's okay.
quantifying, the quantifying cost thing, and like what we can really expect to get out of growth and like those things. I think we need to be able to talk about those things using facts to have any chance of pushing that through in the town, because we go to a town meeting and say, hey, we're thinking we need to preemptively institute MBTA zoning and have, zone this area for multifamily use by right with relatively high density and so on and so forth. I think we need to have a good compelling reason to present to the voters to have that work out. And from a planning standpoint, I think it's gonna likely be the right move for the town, but we need to have the whole package.
Oh, and you gotta get the owners on board. I mean, you may be pushed to act sooner because they may come in with something.
Well, if they do, we can certainly move it up to
Yeah,
medium term
yeah,
or short
yeah,
term.
yeah.
But yeah, I think on its own natural course, I think we need to answer some of those other things first unless it becomes more urgent.
Well, that and the rail trail the railroad expansion, there are a lot of things that could play into that.
Yeah. But I think we have a lot of those factors listed here on the sheet, so us or anybody else who sits in this room after us that looks back on this or keeps it going, they're on notice.
Right.
And also when we go around and talk to other boards, because my goal is to also give this to the select board and say, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think we're getting everything? Do you think there's things we're missing? Are there things here that you don't understand? Because you should probably understand this too. So I think it's gonna be helpful from that standpoint. Before we move on to the other roles and responsibilities, I'm just gonna pause for a moment, ask the one member of public still in the room who was writing furiously while we were talking, do you have anything that you think we missed here?
No. I'm just listening and making some notes, but, I don't know where the planning board sort of falls in this, on this issue, but the issue of a public safety building or a quote-unquote town hall, you know, we've got the Slade building here, we've got offices over in the library that prohibits us from being able to submit for certain grants and whatnot. Where in the town does that issue fall? Cause I view that as a pretty major issue, and especially with the vote on the budget and the school issue, and tied into your, point here, you know, where can we get more revenue or growth from? And we're limited in that, and the school trajectory, you know, there's gonna, and I know that somebody, I can't remember who it was, said, you know, we should have built the public building 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm just wondering, is that a planning board issue to be on here, or does it fall in one of these broader categories?
I know there are some issues related to having zoning districts set up for municipal uses, and other towns have run into problems there. I don't know that we specifically have a problem with it, but that is where, that is ultimately where it would fall into our purview, because we have no direct say over
Okay.
any of those things, other than where it's potentially permissible.
Yeah. The CIPC.
Oh,
capital
there we
improve-
go, capital improvements plan.
Yeah.
Well, they have broached the subject. It's not quite the right place, because we typically look at it, you know, primarily from a free cash perspective. But it has been brought up during those discussions. It really truly is a select board,
Okay.
and a TA,
A TA.
matter,
Okay.
okay?
Thank you, Francois.
No problem.
And Chris.
Yeah.
Anything else? Alright, so, if anybody has anything else occur to them that should be on this, please feel free to reach out to me about it, because as it being a scheduling function, it is something that we can talk about. So, we are free to communicate with each other about scheduling issues.
I did just wanna mention I'm in the CIPC, but, did we finalize that the Community Preservation Committee,
We're gonna run down the whole list right now.
Oh,
That's the
okay, I
next
thought,
thing on the agenda.
okay, I thought you had everything already there.
Alright, so 5D, assign planning board members to fill other roles. So the first thing to come up here, is the Affordable Housing Committee, which is what the select board decided to create on the 15th, as opposed to changing the role of the Housing Authority or establishing some other type of committee. They
But there's-
chose to create it as an Affordable Housing Committee. I think there's a question on whether or not they need to create a Affordable Housing Committee, and then maybe they need another vote to make us not the Affordable Housing Committee. They might have two Affordable Housing Committees right now.
Yeah, they need to,
Yeah, so that needs to get sorted out, but
well, they appointed the planning board as the Affordable Housing Committee.
yeah,
So, if they appoint somebody else as the Affordable Housing Committee, in the same vote, they can say to replace the planning board.
yeah,
They've just been
I didn't,
temporarily acting.
I didn't see the motion of the minutes to know whether or not they did that, and
But they weren't planning on sending it back to us.
yeah, the plan is not to send it back to us,
Great.
although I did receive, there's a couple of reasons to do it that way. The first one is they want it to be cross-functional. They also listened to our discussion about it and some of the challenges that we faced doing it. Because it is tough for us to generate and advocate for the project while simultaneously being the approving authority.
Exactly.
Because it makes it nearly impossible for us to generate a plan that comes to fruition enough to paint it, to present it to the community. Because it's like what Bill, I think it was Bill who always says it, like, good sketches go a long, long way. And if you never even get to the point where we can get good sketches, how do you ever build community support? So I think from that point, it's a good strategic thing, a good strategic move.
And
I
I
think
think-
there's problems with it because somebody needs to make sure the pace still gets pushed over there. The other good thing is it crosses boards. There's gonna be representatives from the people who are stakeholders there. I did get a last request from Ryan on this. He really wanted me to strongly suggest that Alice consider serving on it for at least a little bit to help it get organized and to help transfer that tribal knowledge over.
Well, I guess my thinking is, the next thing that realistically is gonna happen with that committee is VHB is gonna finish its cleanup report on the gravel pit.
Mhm.
And then that's already been marked for senior housing, which will be welcome, cause it won't involve new kids in the school, and we have a horrible housing problem for them. And I don't really, that's November, so the can's kicked down the road. They probably won't make their November deadline anyway, because we were late signing the contract
Yeah.
and whatever. But the other thing, the Streeter Road property, you know, I think this committee has to be formed, and then they have to decide whether it's gonna be used for affordable housing, or it's gonna be, or whether maybe that many units with that much opposition isn't worth it, whatever they're gonna decide. And I have no great desire to be involved in that decision, but
But
in
you're
the
also
interest of keeping things going, I'll do it.
okay. I was about to say you're also making a really good argument right now of why you're the right person to help get it organized. Even if you help get it organized
Well,
for 6 months,
6
and then we
months,
talk
6
somebody
months.
else
I'll
into
give
it.
you 6 months, and then I'm gonna be, yeah.
I'd like to point out that was how I got strong arm into the chair seat.
Yeah,
So.
I'm a certain somebody
You
who's
owe
sitting
me,
at this
Alice.
table. Alright.
Okay.
Do I need to write back to Ryan to say that?
So.
Whoever Ryan is these days, I guess, Sandra, right?
Yeah, Sandra. Do we actually need a motion for? I think just for safety's sake, let's get a motion, and I'll make that motion. That we send Alice Livedall as our representative to the Affordable Housing Committee.
I second that motion.
Hearing a first and a second. Any discussion?
6 months. For 6 months.
For 6
Friendly
months.
amendment.
I'm not willing to take that as a friendly amendment.
How about a
You're
hostile?
stuck. You're stuck.
Alright, Livedall aye.
Schneider, aye.
Monroe, aye.
Demalia, aye.
Thank you. Congratulations, Alice. So the meeting schedule for that hasn't been set up yet, so that's why all of that's TBD.
You want me to send in that notice? Are you gonna send that notice? So I get on the right list for when they
Yeah,
organize it?
you can send it.
Who do I send it to? Just Sandra?
Yeah, Sandy,
Sandy.
and I'll probably copy Jeff on it, although I believe Sandy is steering the ship.
Sandy and Jeff. Okay,
But
Jeff
who-
is chair now, isn't he?
Yes,
Okay.
but it was a select board initiative, so, and yeah, they've been chasing me for that, and always,
And you?
yeah, and well, I wasn't gonna say that, but, the admin email address, cause Ryan is still doing some consulting.
Okay. What's her name again?
There's Sandy.
Not
who-
Sandy. Oh, you mean the, the
so,
select board
okay, so.
admin is,
I guess that this is actually complicated on who to copy, so yeah, I like to be copied.
okay,
Sandra is the acting town administrator.
Right.
Ryan is still doing some consulting for us for a little bit to help
Okay.
Sandy out. Tony
that's it.
is
Yeah.
helping fill in for admin stuff for us, specifically with minutes
okay,
and agendas and that stuff, and Mallory is still working Monday and Tuesday nights, but she's also simultaneously expected to train the new person and do a whole bunch of board stuff.
alright, I'll send it to Mallory, Tony, Ryan, Sandy, Jeff, and you.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
That rounds it out. So, just to caveat, if anybody sees anything here they're really passionate about while we're running down the list, please feel to speak up. The next one on the list is Economic Development Committee, and we have the description there. It's on the third Wednesday at 6:30. I am currently the member serving on that, and we did vote on this previously. I am willing to keep serving on that. If somebody would like to take that over in the future, they're welcome to, but I think Whitney would be not happy if I didn't continue on with that for at least another 6 months or so while the EDC tries to get the town center project going. Because the responsibility on the town side is on the EDC for doing a zoning overlay because of how the contract was written with MRPC. So, she would very much like me to stay there, so.
Yeah, you've gotta stay on that, cause how can they do zoning without somebody from the zoning board?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, it could be somebody else from the zoning board, but, I'm gonna suggest that Whitney is partial to me for at least the next 6 months. And that's already been voted, so I don't think we need to do that again. Town Administrator Search Committee, oversees the hiring of a new town administrator.
Erica's
That
doing
is
it?
Erica. And I think that's awesome. I think you've seen a lot on what's currently going on and what our current struggles are, and I think you'll do an awesome job
They have a
advocating.
consultant that's gonna
Yeah.
help them though, so
Yeah.
we're gonna get there.
Yeah, but we're counting on you to plug for us and talk about the importance of somebody who understands land use and developing a good, thorough, robust land use department. So, represent us well. The next one down the list is Montechusett Regional Planning Commission representative. It meets on the first Thursday of every month, is why we moved our meeting. I have me as serving. Historically, we've done it as the chair doing it. I need to learn more about MRPC and how they work and how our relationship works with them. So I actually would really like to invest some time in that for at least a few months. And if anybody's super excited about taking that over, I think we can entertain that discussion then. But I need to get my feet wet over there first. So if there's no objections, I propose we leave that as it is. And I believe we already voted on this on a previous meeting too.
And the next one, I asked them, the MJTC is somehow affiliated with the MRPC, I'm not quite sure, but they don't have to be represented by the same person.
Yep.
So I clarified that, and I've already been appointed to that, so you don't need to vote it again.
Okay. So I have a
don't
question
think-
about both of these. When I looked on the website, there were actually 2 representatives from Hubbardston. One of them was you, and the other one was somebody who used to be on the select board. His name's Michael, he spoke at the town meeting, he's a
Stouter?
doctor, yeah, that one.
Okay.
Was his name being on that just an artifact from
think so.
days of yore, or, cause they still think he's supposed to show up to meetings, I think. So.
What's his name, and I'll ask when
Michael Stouter,
Yeah.
Stauder.
Cause I was pulling some agendas and minutes, and I was looking at who was at the meetings and who wasn't at the meetings, and there was a meeting that was not from that long ago, where they had both Alice and him marked as absent
Okay.
in their minutes.
do you have a number for him? I could call him up, it's probably in the directory.
I don't have a number handy.
He's a former select board member.
Yeah.
Okay,
So.
I'll find it, I'll find it.
And we probably
Go along.
shouldn't share the number on
Yeah.
the
No, yeah, don't
broadcast.
put it
I
in the
don't have
records.
it. No, I was just checking if I had it.
I mean, he's
don't-
active on the Facebook.
I don't have it.
I'm sure
He's part of
Lori-
the CIPC,
I mean,
that's
if
why.
we can have 2, and I have no problem with, I just didn't, when I've shown up, they do code, you know, it's all been virtual, right?
Yeah.
They do code sometimes the towns and then they don't, or they name call it quickly and where you're from, and I never made that link, so if he wants to serve with me, that'd be great.
Well, I think we're supposed to have a delegate and an alternate, I don't know, I'll work to figure it out. I don't know if it works the same way on both of those, but we'll get a
And
handle on it.
maybe you're supposed to update it every year too.
Maybe.
I'll also try
This is
to-
why I moved our meetings, so we can go to it.
Not-
We'll
not-
figure it out.
Oh, wait. He's on the regional planning or on the MJTC? Michael
MJ.
Stout. Oh, okay.
He's on the MRPC list.
Oh, okay.
I didn't look to see if he
Okay.
was also on the MJTC list.
Okay, no, he wasn't, I think I'm the only one on there, that's what I was thinking.
And it's
Okay.
possible, maybe that comes as a seat appointment from CIPC, I don't know.
Well, that's kinda what I thought, which
Right.
is why I asked if I'm no longer a member with the MRPC, can I be on the MJTC?
Pretty sure you
And the
can.
guy said I can.
Yeah.
So that's one, so you haven't finished, like, this committee is important because of its involvement with, and I guess I would finish that sentence, with funding and planning for roads and infrastructure.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
should have said that.
and most of it's kinda over my head, honestly, but they do have where projects are in the list and how you get them in, and I'm learning.
We all are every day. So, moving down the list, CPC. CPC, for the benefit of the public, the CPC is charged to review all applications for CPC projects and refer projects to town meeting for funding approval. So CPC funding is a thing to understand, and it comes from essentially a luxury real estate tax. It's a tax on properties over a certain amount. It comes in a general fund. Excuse me, not a general fund. It comes in a fund where it can only be used for certain things, and the CPC committee makes recommendations after hearing applications on those things and where to spend money. This is where the money came from that has been earmarked for doing the church and some other projects.
Habitat House,
Yep.
but mostly it's Parks and Recreation and History and what's the other category?
A little over a year ago, the CPC was used for Lombard Road, East Quabbin Land Trust, land purchase.
Yes,
Yep.
yeah.
250
Yeah, yeah.
acres.
That's correct.
Right, so it's, right, conservation, but also Parks and Recreation, they built the 2 playgrounds in town with that money.
Yeah.
Restoration also historical.
Yep.
But I'm
Versus-
exhausted from that, just because it was so much work to try to get the church through, it still is missing documents today, and we're trying to sort it
How's
all
the
out.
church project going?
It's supposed to be cited next week, and we're looking for the signed document, which is lost somewhere in the administrative, yeah.
Because there's activity around the church.
Yeah, they're gonna have to
that
do a
is-
lot of repairs before they could get to the siding.
Okay.
Foundation repair, it's all their tab, but they've
Mhm.
finally gotten there, and I really wanna help, but I don't have the document, you know, it's.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then I had, we wound up over the process, which was a couple cycles, with the Habitat House, having to get some help from them, because it was so hard to raise money and the costs were so high. So I'm just exhausted from it, I just need somebody else to do it. But if you don't do it, nobody speaks for affordable housing.
I mean, we got a hand
You
up.
got a
We
hand,
could
you
end
wanna
this
do
discussion
it?
early.
Alright,
Yes.
alright,
I
Francois.
did mention this here already to the chair.
They don't get started until about February generally, when the grants come in.
Yes, it meets when needed, and is usually active from December to May.
Yeah. December, I think, more like February, but, yeah.
It's very much like a I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with the CIPC, because CIPC
Yep.
typically is from during that time frame.
It's gonna be a whole new board this year. Sandra worked on it for so long, it's not heading it, so.
I motion that we send Francois Steiger as our representative to the Community Preservation Committee.
Second.
Any discussion?
6 months? Just
Oh.
kidding.
Not taking a friendly amendment, we'll have to fight it. And I choose trial by combat.
Lived all aye.
Any hearing, no discussion, asking for a vote?
Lived all aye.
Steiger, aye.
Monroe, aye.
Demalia, aye.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next on the list is the ARPA committee, which
Pretty much done.
I hope so. Theoretically has 2 or 3 meetings left tops, but who knows?
Gotta be you, you're so involved already.
Yeah. I know.
I make a motion, we appoint Christopher Monroe to the ARPA committee.
Well, I already am, as
Already.
we did that at our first
Okay.
organizational meeting.
Next 3 meetings.
But I
only
do
go.
wanna throw out, if anybody really, really wants this, I would be happy to let somebody else do it and then just face the wrath of the chair of that committee.
Who happens to be?
Oh dear, well,
The, who happens to be the first toughest chair in Hubbardston. I tried.
We'll let you have the pleasure.
CIPC,
I've already been assigned to that.
did we actually do the vote on it?
I think we did.
though?
I think we did,
Okay.
but, and, I mean, yeah,
Okay,
and I've done it for the last 2 years, so this is now the 3rd year.
okay, and then the last one is the Agricultural Accessory Committee, which, unfortunately, I believe I'm thoroughly committed to, because I have the action item that's holding it up, which is finish drafting the first cut of the bylaw, and I don't have to tell you guys why I'm running behind on that.
Burnout, it's a big problem.
I mean, comparatively, this is the fun stuff, you know.
I know, it's hard to get planning stuff done, and it's so important,
But,
you know.
like, I didn't choose being a lawyer as my profession because I didn't like working through tough problems and arguing things out. So this is the fun part.
Maybe it's
The drafting is sometimes challenging, especially when stuff like this keeps coming up. So that concludes that list. Now, there is another new business item here, and thank you everybody for that. I think this is gonna go a long way to getting us organized and getting us to make some movements. I wanted to wait until we had a new land use coordinator to really dig into the kind of this stuff, but we've just reached a point where we can't hold off. We gotta deal with the situation we have and push the pace. So thank you all for your patience while we've been getting better organized. Now, this next discussion, 5F, I wanted to talk about the idea of potentially having a clerk or a vice chair. And I understand that there's some history about this from before I was on the board, and maybe the right answer is to just have a clerk. And what my expectation of the clerk would be, is that they would just work with Tony, and whoever the land use coordinator ends up being and or is, and just reconciles our minutes and helps facilitate that process. So it's not somebody I'm expecting to take that on, and I also believe that from Robert's rules, if we didn't have a vice chair, the clerk would also step into my absence temporarily, but not automatically if I resign and move to Florida.
Become the chair.
Yeah, and I believe that's what some of the previous history was, so I wanted to throw that out and have
That
a
was
discussion about that.
actually a Robert's Rules kind of thing, it wasn't in our charter,
Mhm.
but under general Robert's Rules, if a chair resigns, the vice chair, who's been elected, automatically assumes the role, and that was an issue we had. So you only
No.
need to have a clerk, and the clerk can chair the meetings, and the vice chair is.
No, I thought,
No, I don't.
and I don't wanna go deep into this because it's after 10, but I thought that was only for the purpose, and this is probably what the argument was about. I thought that was only for the purpose of the specific meeting, like not in perpetuity. So like if I was to just grab my water bottle and be like, I can't handle this anymore, I'm
Yeah,
out.
that's my fear.
It would be in that context. But if I was to be like, somebody just gave me the dream offer of a lifetime, I'm gonna go play for the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah, that's my fear.
That would actually call for an organizational meeting again. And I'm sure that's what they argued back in the day, cause you
They
probably
argued that it
can
was
argue
to
that.
fulfill the remainder of the term.
I don't think that's right.
I don't know. Robert's Rules is actually much more complicated than you think. There's the huge version, and then there's the
Oh,
short
I'm-
version, and there are 7 editions of different.
I am well aware.
Yeah.
The Idiot's
Okay.
Guide to Robert's Rules is like 350
Yeah.
pages.
Therefore
So,
requires another idiot
but it's whatever.
for that.
So it's whatever we wanna do.
Whatever you want.
I have faith in this current board and the makeup of this board to do the right thing if I was to get hit by a bus and move on swimmingly without me after much stress. And granted, you plan for what could be in the future, but anyways, that would be after we had our next organizational meeting and we could just choose to do different appointments then. Cause who knows if I'm even chair after the next election. I'll be here, but who knows if I'm chair, cause we reorganize every year. So what are the thoughts? Do we just need to do a clerk? Do we need to do both? Do we have somebody who'd like to volunteer for this?
My worry about being clerk is that it does put you officially sort of in charge of keeping the calendars and, I mean, it's kind of a defined term, isn't it? I don't wanna be the one calling things like, when does the special permit stuff, it's just too stressful. And minutes and everything else, you know, you're supposed to have one, this is, which is why now almost all boards make it their administrative assistant.
Mhm.
So, I'd be inclined to leave it vacant and see if they'd hire somebody in the next matter.
So the current, and I have not had the meeting on who the current hire is, but my understanding is it's also a shared hour arrangement for a while. That there's the potential that it's gonna be somebody else who's just picking up like 20 hours. I don't know that it's actually a full-time land use, land use coordinator. That's my concern. And I try to manage as much as possible, and I don't wanna end up in a situation like potentially the ZBA's and where some kind of issue like this goes by, so in my mind, I look at this as having a second set of eyes that looks at these things. And to the point that you talked about, like managing when the period runs for an application, and I would not expect, and I don't think any of us would expect a clerk to know the existence of federal statutes that we had never heard even uttered in
Like today?
our lives. Yeah, like,
So,
I did
right,
federal work exclusively,
now,
and I've
when
never heard that before.
questions come in, they're being handled by whom? I mean, you email, it's still the same address that Mallory had.
Yeah, Mallory is, when she's in, she's forwarding what she has to me. Or she's forwarding it to the entire board recently.
Okay.
Jeez.
And then I'm placing that into the folder as I get a chance if nobody else has. We don't have a clearly defined process to that, that's why we have this, on the previous sheet, there was the defined administrative process, because we don't have good answers for that. I guess in my mind, I'd like to see where we have a standard policy, where if that comes into plan at Hubbardston, that they get a message back saying, thank you for reaching out to us, we do this with correspondence, which is put it in the folder for the next meeting or distribute to all board members. We actually outline that in there, and if it's something that rises to the level of a question that we need to address and not just general feedback, that the chair answers it at their discretion. But that's actually in by process and policy, that's actually what we say as a board should happen, and that we have a vote, and that actually be an administrative process. So yeah, I'm thinking about that, and that's where I want us to end up. But the challenge and why I don't think we've been able to have a conversation about this is we have interim everything right now. And I don't think we're gonna be able to finalize this. I know one of the things that Ryan was really excited about with the previous hire was the idea that we were gonna have somebody who was full-time, who was actually fairly green, but that was actually a benefit in terms of us documenting and establishing administrative policies, because we can talk about things like that and actually write it out, which eventually leads to a resource book on some of those issues. So I'm sorry that was such a long way to answer that, but this is what happens when it's late. So I guess ultimately I'm asking if somebody would be willing to temporarily serve in that clerk role. And, or I guess we can look at this alternatively, where we just, where somebody takes an action item to work with Tony on getting us caught up on the minutes, because I just don't have the bandwidth to do it. If somebody would like to take that separately, we can just bypass this whole clerk conversation.
Can we just have like till the 7th to think about it?
Yeah.
That's reasonable.
I mean, I think one of the things what would be very beneficial would be is if Tony can compile a list of all of the minutes that we currently have. And from there, then we can find out which ones we have missing. then we can quantify how big this effort is.
Okay.
I mean, I've griped about the fact that we have a lack of minutes.
I
that
think we've done
are-
a lot of catching up though.
We have done
Yeah.
quite a bit of catching up, but the catching up that we've done has been fairly recent, and I do believe that there's minutes that have not been necessarily reviewed and or approved, nor are they viewable and available online.
So this is something that where we have been challenged because of the interim everybody. Because I didn't realize until 2 days ago that Tony didn't have access to our Google Drive and that she didn't know it didn't exist until I was like, hey, do you know we have a Google Drive where we keep our agendas and where we normally look for all of these folders?
And she should not only have access, she should have administrative access to it.
She does now.
Okay.
Now she has administrative access. I have administrative access, and the town administrator account has administrative access.
Okay.
So you just, what's missing is the list of what's missing is what's missing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so if.
we need to know what's missing
Yeah.
and come up with a better plan for addressing
Or
it.
just even have a list of what is there, so anything that is not there, we could retrace back what the meetings were, and so try to determine whether or not we have to go back and review either tapes or
I
see
don't know
if
how
there's
big a
something.
job that is for her.
Well, I think it's a fair question to ask Tony and come back to it on the 7th,
Yeah.
the ultimate day of reckoning. But
Well, the thing is,
Lots.
Mallory probably has better records of what's missing than mine's kind of a hodgepodge, no?
I think Tony has 10 hours allocated to supporting us though, so I think she's more likely to have the time doing it, whereas our ask of Mallory is already unfair.
No, what I meant, she may have left a record, a minute book
Oh,
somewhere.
that's a good point.
Right?
Yeah.
That
Right.
is, I have one that stops about last February that I could pull together, but Tony may have it all there. Mallory was pretty organized.
Yeah.
So you might ask Mallory, does it already exist in
Okay.
some some file on your desk that you could send over to Tony? Cause you don't wanna reinvent the wheel, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. So I'll do that. I'll reach out to Tony and to Mallory and see if that's something that we can get them to put together, and we'll readdress this on the 7th.
Alright.
So that moves us down to matters not reasonably anticipated by chair.
You think about everything. There can't be anything, can there?
All right.
Nothing after 10.
That was implied by my glare around the room. Administrative matters, we covered that a little bit out of order. Public comments, thank you very much.
We'd shoot you too at this point.
I got the glare also.
And would anybody like to?
I'm making a motion
make a
for us to adjourn this meeting,
How about a second?
I'll second it.
non-debatable.
Non-debatable, let's have a vote.
Live till I.
Steiger, aye?
Demalia, aye.
Monroe, aye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much,
Wow.
everybody, for your patience.